All right, we're gonna get started with the next portion of the greenhouse project, and that's building the raised beds and tables for the hydroponic garden setups. At first I was gonna make individual raised bed and hydroponic garden setups and move them into the greenhouse, but instead I figured I could just go ahead and do a whole integrated system where I'm actually building shelves or tables that are bolted up to the framework of the greenhouse or the dog kennel frame. So they're just fixed structures, almost like a house. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and more than likely I'm probably going to use less materials, which, as you can see, I gathered right here from the scrap pile. A bunch of scrap wood, some litter buckets and oil dry buckets, and these are obviously going to be part of the raised bed setups. And I have some old apparatus that I had from some hydroponic garden setups from the past that I'll also be using. But in the meantime, I have to actually get the shelves set up, and we'll go ahead and get that started. And stay tuned, I'll be right back. All right, so far what we're going to be looking at right here, first thing is this drum. This drum here, contrary to what one might think if they first seen it, is actually going to be a hopper for the hydroponic garden setup. Being a 55-gallon drum, it'll hold plenty of plant solution to feed the hydroponic gardens that'll be in this greenhouse for a good long time. I will be later on putting some plumbing attachments to the sides of the drum for the inlet and outlet lines that'll be pushing solution up to the hydroponic gardens, as well as serving as the drain return from the gardens. Now, moving on, looking at this wood setup that I've got going currently, made out of 2x6 boards and some posts and other miscellaneous lumber. As you can see, I'm using the chain link fence framework structure as part of the support to the shelves. And like at these junctions right here, I actually took posts, attached a smaller piece of 2x6 to the top of the post, and then secured these boards as such with simple wood screws, and everything is just sitting on loose boards so they don't sink into the rock or distort my floor here. Basically same thing going on here. I'm going to have another shelf coming along here and probably terminating a few feet from the door, so there's room to actually come back into the greenhouse. And I also have the same thing here on this wall. I'll have another shelf with a post and everything that will terminate straight at the edge of the door frame. But simple setup. I'll add extra lumber for the bucket beds and extra support boards for the hydroponic garden setups, which I'll explain later when we actually start assembling those things. So we will move on and continue putting our shelving system together. Let's get to it. All right, we got all our shelves set up as far as the base frames. We got one right here extending a couple feet from the doorway, gate, whatever, made on the same concept with the 2x6 boards overlapping underneath to help support everything, along with the posts and the board at the bottom. Same thing right here. Obviously, from what we could see, I was unable to come right up to the back of the gate here, because otherwise that would have left us with about a foot of space there to squeeze between, which we don't want that. So we compromise and just have this little space right here, which we'll still be able to do something with. But as with the other stuff, built on the same concept with the boards underneath, the posts, all that good stuff, all held together with wood screws. I put the hydroponic frames up there just to kind of give you an idea of how that setup will look when it is fully set up and operational. But as you can see, you got a reasonable amount of room in the center to move around, work around, especially when plants grow. And there's plenty of height here for any kind of plants that might grow high, such as any kind of viney vegetables or plants like tomatoes or cucumbers or whatnot. But like I said, base frame's done. The next thing we'll end up doing later on, now that we have everything where we want it, is to drill holes and put some screws in to secure these ends to the chain link fence frame of the dog kennel, so everything is unable to move, everything is nice and solid. Then we could start putting boards in, so we could start putting our bucket beds and supports for the hydroponic stuff and all that other good crap in. So that'll be next. All right, as before, I stated that I had to finish securing the backs of the boards where they made up to the wall panels, and we've done that. Drilled a hole, single hole at the end of each board. It's pretty much the same there, there, and over there. And drove a single deck screw, 3 3/4 inch deck screw, all the way through the board and through the metal, and secure all these ends so the whole shelving assembly won't move. Next thing that I did was take some 2x6s, the same boards that I use for the shelf, and made dividers and supports, of course, for holding up our cat litter buckets that are going to be used as raised beds. And just like with the rest of the shelving unit, I took shorter pieces of 2x6 and secured them to the ends of the long boards, and then used those as kind of like a tie board or something, so I could butt up these 2x6s to the boards here, as you could see, so everything looks nice and neat instead of just a whole bunch of visibly overlapping boards. Now, of course, because of the spacing here, I ended up having to cut a 2x4 and securing it on the end here, still tucked away nice and neat, so it can accommodate the end bucket there. And it kind of works out, because when we put the hydroponic setup right here, it kind of allows us a little bit of extra room between the bucket and where the bed would be at. More than likely, I'll probably end up moving these hydroponic setups somewhere like that in order to have better spacing and all. But as you can see so far, this setup is coming together. Pretty much have one shelf right here done. Just need more buckets, of course. And I need to do the rest of these setups here. Probably end up having something else in here as well. Maybe a drum. I don't know. I have to see what all is available. And I still have to make the supports for the hydroponic garden setups as well. So we're going to continue with our work. All right. I also took time to cut a couple of 2x4s to do the same thing like I did with the 2x6s over there. And went ahead and did the boards underneath just like over there. And this little section right here obviously will accommodate 4 bucket beds here, with a little space in the middle. Now, the space in the middle may or may not be used for something else, but it is there in case I need to put something in this area here, some kind of support for something like a grow light, or who knows. We'll figure it out, but the space is available though between these beds. And if for no other reason, the space is just there for maybe growing a larger viney plant, or heck, even putting some type of trellis crap up around or in between these buckets when they're growing something like cucumbers. The possibilities are endless. But we got another little section here that's pretty much ready to rock and roll. Just need more buckets. So, again, I continue working on here as I fish out parts, but I'm still trying to get to the hydroponics setup. So that will be next. All right. Since I've finally decided to get to the hydroponic garden setups that I've been putting off for a while, I went ahead and made up a couple more boards. These aren't necessarily divider boards like the buckets that you see in the frame here, but they're based on the same concept, having a little tie board here attached to it so I could butt the ends together with the shelf boards. But these 2 boards are the second pair that are going to be used for the second hydroponic garden down there, because right here is how the finished product is going to look. Boards set up in the same way with the tie boards underneath like before, with the screws going in from the top and resting on the horizontal frame of the horizontal tube of the wall frame. And as you can see, this hydroponic garden assembly here rests on it nicely. I'm probably going to come back with some conduit straps to secure this thing to the 2x6 board. Another reason why I use such a wide board to begin with. That way it'll be nice and sturdy and not move. This is probably going to really come out about right here, because those end pipes right there are going to need to be able to have some spacing for the containers that are going to go on there. But all in all, this is how the setup's going to look. The other ones here are going to obviously go right next to this one right here to fill that gap. And I'll probably end up doing some sewer pipe hydroponic garden setups over here to fill this gap. This whole row right here is going to be for hydroponic garden assemblies. And right here, I'm still up in the air. I might do a couple of drum setups. If I could find a drum that I could chop in half, I could go ahead and do a drum setup in this area right here. But in the meantime, we're going to finish up the boards for the hydroponic garden and then move on forward with some more stuff in here. All right, what we got here is a section of 6-inch PVC pipe. This is actually some heavy wall pipe I had laying around, but because we're using what we got, this is what I got. Some thick wall PVC pipe compared to the lighter blue 6-inch PVC pipe that I made a previous hydroponic garden out of. But this here is going to basically mimic that same garden, where I'll end up having a series of large holes drilled and cut along the length of the pipe to accommodate some cups that'll serve as planters. But in the meantime, I have to cut this pipe in half because that space right there won't match the length of this thing. So I'm going to cut that in half. Then at the same time, take two more of my little support boards here that I threw together and set them up right there so they can hold these two halves of pipe side by side. So I can go ahead and at least say that the hydroponic section is more or less set up. There's probably going to still be a few little odds and ends, like some straps to secure the pipes down. And of course, I still have to actually build the hydroponic garden, but that'll be for another day. I'm just trying to get the basic setup laid out, and then I can finish things off afterwards. Well, it's raining outside, and I'm getting ready to go in because this is bullshit. But anyway, I did manage to get the boards anchored in place. I got the pipes cut and everything set up where I want them to be at for the future work when I do assemble the hydroponic garden. But yep, there it is right there. Boards, pipes, rain, and I'm getting soaked. So we'll be concluding this for a second, and in the next round, hopefully when it's not raining, we'll continue on with the rest of our raised bed setups here. So I'll be back. All right, after doing some measurements in the remaining shelf area of the greenhouse, I come to find out that the dimensions were actually more than enough to accommodate a couple of drum halves that are the dimensions of this plastic 55-gallon drum. So we'll actually be able to fill the entire shelf area with just these two drum halves, which will then conclude setting up all the planting spaces in the greenhouse. But in the meantime, I am going to have to cut this drum in half and then line everything up inside to see where I might have to add 2x4s or other lumber to help support the two drum halves within the existing shelf setup. So I'm going to go ahead, chop this thing in half, and I'll be in the greenhouse shortly enough. All right, in the greenhouse here, as you can see, we have the two drum halves situated or staged within the open area. To start things off, I made an end board here with a 2x6 where I cut a notch and added a 2x4 to serve as the little tie board like I did on the other setups. Reason why I didn't use a 2x6 under here is because when I place this board, it's going to fit right in there and be nice and snug and neat and be able to accommodate everything as intended without being too cheesy looking. So yeah, that's why that board's cut like that. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and line up this first drum half so I could see where I could put another board to go crossways between the two drums or drum halves. Then I could go ahead and further attach everything and get it all secured up and see where I stand as far as space and all. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to work. Alright, we went ahead and secured that board on the end right there. Took a drum half and also secured it to two different points, to the end board as seen, and to the main shelf board right here, as you could see. I probably put a couple more fasteners in there just to ensure it stays in there. But my next move is going to be to get a 2x6 more than likely and put it right here to divide this drum half from that drum half. And after I get that board set up there, I'll cut a piece of this 2x4 right here and anchor it along the rail there, or the tube, and that way I could secure that side of the drum half, and of course repeat the same thing over there after I get this drum half mounted up. So I'm going to go ahead, get some more lumber, do some more measuring and cutting, get some more stuff put together. Alright, went ahead and finished everything up. Got this middle board put in, and this little end board right here that I was talking about. In order to secure that, since I couldn't use no tie boards underneath, I just used a simple brace on each side to secure that in. Under here though, I did use a tie board as usual, and a single screw in there to hold that end in. On this side though, while the drum is attached in pretty much the same way with screws all around, the board on the back here is actually held in with these little special braces that are normally used when you're putting together porches or whatever. As a matter of fact, these braces came from the old porch that I tore down a while back and had been salvaged. So they've been reused here to hold this board in place. They actually, inside here, attached to this board, going that way with some screws, and then of course these here hold the 2x4 or 2x8 or whatever in place, as you can see. And same thing right there, because this board here had to be added for the extra support for this drum half. But as you can see, this drum half is fully in along with that one. All the boards are in place to hold it. Everything's nice and neat. There's no boards stacked on top of each other visibly, so it's all nice and neat. This part is ready to rock and roll. We got a variety of beds here. We got our bucket beds, as you've seen before. We got our hydroponic crap over here, and our drum beds right here. So other than finishing things up with the hydroponic setup right there, I could actually start doing things like running plumbing and electrical. So that'll end up being the next thing that I have to do. So there it is.